What's going on, y'all? We got episode 9, Let's Be Real podcast. Welcome back. Look, man, got a lot to cover today. Obviously, had a great week 9 in the NFL. Looking forward to our week 10. We are going to be doing our basketball podcast, the season podcast, coming up here next week. So be ready for that. And yeah, man, got a lot to get into, obviously, with the NFL trade deadline. And so we're going to get into it, man. But look, you know how we always start it. We're going to start off with some wine, man. Look, got a good one for y'all today. This is going to be a wine from Macchia. It is called Mischievous. This is Zinfandel from Lodi. Look, really, really good. Let y'all see what that looked like here. Man, really good. I probably get it about 8.7, 8.8 out of 10. Um, Full bodied, very bold. So if you like something along those lines in a red, definitely recommend this. It is very like blackberry jam, with like kind of a raspberry hint to it, some oak. Um, but definitely, man, a great wine for just kind of sipping, hanging out, watching some sports, man. So look, I already went and bought a second bottle of it. Definitely recommend it. Good price point, right around that $25 range. So definitely recommend it, man. Look, go try it. Go try it. Get a glass, and definitely recommend it. And look, man, we gonna hop into it because look, we had some great games this week, and got some storylines we need to get to. And like I said, as far as getting into the trade deadline, doing some grading, and then looking ahead to next week. And then look, as always, we're gonna have our top five. We're gonna have our bets, which we struggling right now, but we on the rebound. We on the rebound. And so look, let's get into it, man. We're gonna start off with the game of the week, man. Chiefs and Bills. And obviously, Bills beat the Chiefs 28-21. And couple things, man. And look, I came in, I came on last week and said that I thought this was a game that it was one of the first times where we were going to see the Chiefs and the Bills both needing the game in the regular season. Typically it's kind of they want the game, but this is a was a game where seeding implications are on the line, division implications are on the line, and so this is about as close to a needed win in the regular season as these two teams have ever had against each other. And so I'm not going to come on here today and say, Bills got another win in the regular season, Chiefs, whatever. I do partially feel that way, but because there is the implications, I, I can't, I can't sit here and honestly say that I don't think I think the Chiefs were up for this game. It just didn't, they just didn't end up playing well. And so here's what I will say. It did seem as though the Chiefs look, if you've watched these two teams play in the last couple of years, what typically happens is the Chiefs roll out a very vanilla game plan, which typically leads to them losing because they know the Bills are probably their stiffest competition in the AFC, and if they see them again in the playoffs, they don't want anything on film. And so from that standpoint, I think the Chiefs stayed pat. My thought around this game was they were going to be able to win the game regardless, even keeping that vanilla offense, just because I didn't think that Buffalo defense was good. And I thought the Chiefs defense was going to be able to give Buffalo some problems. And look, here's what I'll say, man. The Chiefs came out with the vanilla game plan and did not play well. And the Bills came out like the Bills do every year against the Chiefs and played their Super Bowl. And look, Josh Allen played incredible. Uh, James Cook had a monster game. Their defense played extremely well. And that's typically what we've seen from the Bills in these regular season matchups. Now, what I'll say as far as from the Chiefs end is, look, Patrick Mahomes has his worst game of his professional career, maybe his football life. under 50% completion percentage. Just did not look good at all throughout the whole game. Under pressure all game. And look, we've seen that the way to beat the Chiefs and Mahomes over in a consistent manner over the last 5-6 years of they've been doing this is if you can get pressure on Mahomes without sending extra. And that's what the Bills were able to do all night long. Mahomes wasn't comfortable. And just when you mix Mahomes not being comfortable with also the fact that just Mahomes was just uncharacteristically not himself, it leads to a really, really bad game. So defense, it played all right. Typically, it's with the defense, they got the stops they needed to give them a chance, and the offense couldn't capitalize. But with all that being said, offense very vanilla. Josh Allen and the Bills playing probably their best game of the season. Mahomes playing the worst game. The offense looking really bad. And it was Mahomes at the end of the game with a chance to win. 7-point game, had 2 chances to go down and get a tie or win. And so what I'll say is, look, you never feel good after a loss. But that is a loss from the Chiefs where you can look at that and say, okay, we didn't give up anything from our game plan that we're going to be using in the playoffs. Mahomes didn't really scramble at all, which has been something that he's been doing really well this year and typically turns on in the playoffs. You get the worst game from Mahomes. Your defense plays, a C plus game, and you still have a chance to win. And from the Bills' perspective, you got to look at it. We played an excellent game. Josh Allen was almost perfect. James Cook ran crazy. And we were, sitting on the sideline with a minute left watching Mahomes have a chance to go down the field and win. And so I want to point out what an absolute just terrible job coaching and decision made by by McDermott there at the end to wind the clock down and then attempt that field goal. I get it. The field goal puts you up and it makes it a 2-score game, virtually impossible for them to win. However, if you miss, you're giving Mahomes the ball, a guy who's ripped your heart out consistently when games matter the most at the end of games. You're giving it to him at midfield, and that's what happened. You punt that ball away. I said it right when it happened. I assumed watching them wind the clock down, I said, okay, you take a delay a game here, give your punter a little extra room, pin them back down, and now they've got, I think it was, 20, 30 seconds to march the entirety of the field. That would have been, to me, the smart decision. And it's that kind of coaching mentality, just coupled with everything else we've talked about up to this point, that makes me even more kind of confident in the Chiefs moving into the playoffs. Because I don't think you're going to see another game like that from Patrick Mahomes. I don't think you're going to see anything close to that from Patrick Mahomes, especially in a playoff game or a game that matters. I don't think you're going to see an offense that simple in the playoffs against an Andy Reid. And what I do know is if you're going to make mistakes like that coaching in the regular season, when, let's be honest, it's not a very pressure situation. What can I count on you as far as from coaching and making good decisions when the pressure is up and it is win or go home in the playoffs? And so, for those reasons, I came out of that game. Obviously, if you're the Chiefs, it's rough because, you know, you're in a dogfight in your division right now. I think they've got a good chance to go on a real good stretch here of wins. But again, it's you got to go out and you got to string together some wins. And you have 2 games against the Broncos, who are in the lead of division. You got one more game against the Chargers, who I would assume are probably going to end up falling back with that injury to Joe Alt. They've been a totally different team when he's not playing. So I there's a very realistic road for them to win the division, and kind of just, we're looking at this at the end of the year as like, oh yep, Chiefs had a little blip to start the year, and there they go, winning the division. But again, it shrinks the margin of error they have moving forward. You can't lose any more. You can't have a week where it's like, should have won this game, overlooked them. You can't have that now. But from a standpoint of, if the Chiefs were to meet the Bills in the playoffs, this game makes me so much more confident that they would beat the Bills. Next, man, look, we got the Steelers and the Colts. So Steelers beat the Colts 27-20. And look, I think it's look, I've been skeptical of the Colts, and I think it's a fair, kind of question to ask around this after we saw that game is, is this going to be the start of the regression for Daniel Jones? Because look, I mean, we talked about it last week. The Steelers' defense this year has not been some dominant defense, some great defense. But Daniel Jones threw 3 picks, and they weren't exactly, not his fault interceptions. They were pretty, you have one that tipped at the line of scrimmage, it went up. It's just, but those are things that happen. And so, to me, I think it's a very real question as far as, can you really count on Daniel Jones moving forward? And, I think it's even more so now a real question with them going out, acquiring Sauce Gardner, giving up the 2 first-round picks to go get him. Because what that's telling you now is, I mean, he essentially is locked in Indianapolis. Because what's your alternative? I mean, it's not, are you going to roll the dice again on a quarterback, brand new veteran quarterback who is, cut from another team, to bring him in and start it over? Most likely not. You don't have the draft capital to get a first-round quarterback. And so Daniel Jones, you kind of give Daniel Jones all the leverage here. Now, I mean, obviously, if he really implodes, yeah, do they cut him? Sure. But he's going to come into this offseason, and as long as he doesn't fully implode, he's going to demand a big number. And he's probably going to get it because Indianapolis seems to have gone all in and said we don't need the draft capital for a quarterback. We've got our guy. And so, to me, I think, moving forward, I'm not saying you're going to get 3 interception games, but I think you're going to get closer to the Daniel Jones we saw in New York probably than the Daniel Jones we've been seeing over the first 8 weeks. And I think, again, I think what that's going to then cause is the Colts front office, Colts fans, who right now or coming into this last week are probably extremely, optimistic about what their opportunities look like moving forward. I think that's going to change as we kind of get throughout the season. And so, again, only time will tell. But I think that this is much more of a Daniel Jones regression to the mean and who he really is, as opposed to, the other side where if you're the Steelers, you're hoping this is the Kickstarter to your, defense starting to come around and, kind of work its way into form. Again, I think the Steelers defense is what we've seen for the last, 9 weeks. And if I'm wrong and the Steelers defense is kind of just, this is the turning point of them really getting into form and turning into a top defense, then look, the Steelers with Aaron Rodgers playing the way he's playing at a good level, not great, but good. They become legitimate contenders if you have a great, great defense on that side. I just lean to the fact, I lean more towards it's not a turning point for the Steelers defense. It's more so, like I said, the Daniel Jones regressing to who he truly is. And I think that's what we're going to see moving forward. Because to me, I don't see the Steelers as real contenders or, a team that you'd really be worried to play in the playoffs. And I could see the Colts turning into a team where if you do get matched up with them in the playoffs, you might be pretty happy about it. Next, man, we are going to move into another guy who, look, I thought a regression was coming, and he was a guy who I was, behind as far as an MVP candidate last year, and that is Sam Darnold and the Seahawks. Look, man, they come out 38-14 win over the Commanders. And we're going to get to the Commanders and the Jaden Daniels part of it, obviously with that injury he sustained in the game. But look, man, the Seahawks have shown that they are a legitimate team in the NFC that can contend. And Sam Darnold is putting together a second straight season of MVP caliber football. And so, I mean, with the emergence of Jackson Smith and Jigba, becoming a true number one right now, on pace for over a 2,000-yard receiving season. He's going crazy. Sam Darnold is, he's shown that in the last 2 years, you get him in the right offense, you give him some good weapons, and he is able to be that quarterback that everybody thought he was, from early in his college career, as far as, thinking he was deserving to be a top 5 pick in the NFL. And so, look, I think the Seahawks have really, if y'all remember, I was very, very low on the Seahawks. I did not think they were, I think I had them with less than 6 wins. So, very wrong on my end. But I think if you're an NFC team in the playoffs, again, we'll have to see what Sam Darnold looks like. And I talked about this the other week is, was the playoff game and Lions game we saw last year to end the season, is that going to be him moving forward in like a, James Harden-esque fashion where when, games get bigger, playoff time comes around, he's a guy who shrinks in the moment? Or is it, we're looking at a guy who had his first playoff experience and it didn't go well, but, comes back and learns from it and ends up, kind of turning it around. So that's yet to be seen. If it is that latter part and you get good quarterback play from Sam Darnold in the playoffs, they're a team that, with the defense playing the way it is, with the weapons they have, and now them adding Rashid Shaheed, another weapon for Sam Darnold, a real over-the-top weapon, that can beat you downfield. That's just going to open more up for JSN and for those tight ends. And look, I think this offense starts humming even more. And again, I think by the end of the season, we're talking about Sam Darnold again in MVP talks. And look, man, from the opposite side, from the Commanders' standpoint, right? Obviously, game out of hand. Jaden Daniels still in and gets hurt. Pretty nasty looking arm injury. And here's a couple things, because I can see from both standpoints of, leaving him in, taking him out, benefits and, obviously cons for each. And so here's what I'll say to start. Obviously, Monday morning quarterbacking, it's unfair to do, because if, let's say, he stayed in the game, didn't get hurt, but then threw, let's see, how much did they lose by 24? Let's say he threw another 2 touchdowns. What we're doing is coming into this week saying, wow, yeah, they game was out of hand, didn't really have a chance to win, but it looks like their offense found something. And I think that's why you leave them in. You're talking about a team in the Commanders who, look, last year in the conference championship game, and this year has, not looked great, dealt with some injuries, and their offense just hasn't really clicked at all this year. Now, granted, that's because of injuries, that's because of just it not clicking, but I can understand them leaving him in, trying to get some momentum moving forward, right? You want to get some momentum to something you can hang your hat on, say, look, guys, yeah, bad loss, but these last 3 drives when we scored twice, let's look at something positive from this game that we can take and move forward with. And so I can get that, but with that comes the risk of injury. And with a player like Jaden Daniels, who, let's be honest, at this point is more so shown that he is a little bit of a, injury prone player, especially at his size, that, there is that risk with it. Another thing I'll say, while I agree, it's because I thought leaving him in was the right move when I was watching the game. I didn't think they should have took him out. I thought, try to get something rolling with your offense that you can, bring into the next couple weeks. That being said, play calling, you got to be smarter. Having, a run option, just even if it is an RPO, anything like that, you got to let Jaden know, hey, man, we're not taking hits. If you keep the ball, you're throwing it. We are throwing the ball. We're handing it off. We're throwing the ball. We don't need to take any hits. Just let's get out of this game healthy, but let's see if we can get something going. So from a play caller standpoint, I think that's where the real kind of problem was with this. And look, the other side of it is, hey, guys, it's a loss. Why keep them in? Get your guys out. Get out of the game healthy. We're in a sport where injuries can happen on any single play at a higher rate than a lot of other sports. And so, again, we see teams pull their guys early, more so now than ever, and justifiably so. But again, I think a lot of this is just the Monday morning quarterbacking, kind of reacting to the outcome as opposed to, reacting to the, reacting to it in the time. And so I don't blame them for it. Again, I think it's just, there's no right or wrong answer, but there are ways, like I said, you can be a little bit smarter going about it. Next, man, look, we are going to talk about some inconsistency here. And it is in relation to the Green Bay Packers. Because, look, as we've seen a couple times this year, when everything is clicking, they look incredible. Look, I moved them into the top 5 last week. When they're clicking and the offense looks good, the defense looks good, they're one of those teams where you're watching and you're like, gosh, they're going to win the Super Bowl. And then you have games like this last week where they lose 16-13 to the Panthers. And look, the Panthers, I think a lot of people were talking about it. A lot of teams are kind of falling into the kind of thinking of, oh, it's the Panthers. The Panthers have been solid this year. They have been solid. And so I think, they're an easy team to overlook, which I think is what happened here. But look, defense did its job. 16-13 gave up 16 points to the Panthers. It's not the worst. I mean, it's you hold the team under 20, you give your offense a good chance to win. But it's been the story of why I cannot fully commit to trusting the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love. Jordan Love again did not play a great game. Jordan Love again, head scratching interception that he threw it and you're like, what are you thinking, man? First down, don't need a big shot, still in the game. You go deep into triple coverage, and as you're getting hit, it's those things where look, I get it. It's part of when he makes that throw and his receiver comes down with it, everybody loves it, and it's like, yep, look at this offense, look how great Jordan Love is. But you got to live with the bad. And again, it's one of the reasons why I cannot put them into a true contender status is because Jordan Love is prone to come out and have a game like that with an interception like that. And in the playoffs, let alone against Carolina, it can cost you. And so, look, what I'll say is if the Packers can ever figure it out, and if Jordan Love can ever figure it out, that team is going to be the last team anybody wants to face in the playoffs. But until they do, it's just, to me, you can't put them into a true contender status because they're just too unpredictable. And Jordan Love, that quarterback, he's too unpredictable as well. So moving forward, that's kind of how again, Jordan Love might come out and have 4 straight games, and people are going to hop in these comments and say, oh my gosh, this idiot, look at him. He doesn't know what he's talking about, because that's what happened the last time I went in on Jordan Love. And now I'm going to go back and tag all you people. But no, but but it's a real thing. And so, he's shown that it's a tale of two quarterbacks with Jordan Love. And I think it's, again, he might go on a stretch here where he's playing crazy and the Packers look unbeatable. But to me, all that means is we're just waiting on the next game where we get a dud and we see a game-losing interception. So that's where I'm at with Green Bay and with Jordan Love. Next, man, let's talk about a team that not inconsistent anymore. Looks like they're on the rise. Thursday night game, Ravens absolutely demolish the Dolphins. And let's just go ahead. We can write the obituary for the Dolphins now. They were somewhat sellers at the deadline. Nothing crazy. Obviously they tried to move Waddle. Sounded like you had to give up a first for that. No one biting on that, which, like, Jalen Waddle, I think he's a really, really good too. I probably also would not give up a 1 for him unless you're just in dire need, which I don't think anybody really is. A-Chain was another guy I thought maybe could possibly be moved. He's staying put. The real question now with them is, what do you do with Tua? A guy who over the last few weeks has gone to press conferences and blamed other people after multi-interception games. The guy who has come out and said that the problem with Tyreek is he needs to know I can't throw the ball as far as he can. I can't throw the ball far enough. So he needs to keep, he needs to rein it in some. The guy who called out his team and the lack of leadership to player meetings, of which he should be the leader of. The guy who the other week said, sometimes it's really hard for me to see the middle of the field because I can't see over the offensive line, so I can't throw blind. Again, these are all things in the last month and a half that Tua has come out and said in press conferences. And look, I know typically we appreciate honesty from our athletes. Sometimes, as an athlete, you don't need to be so honest. And I think that this is the point for Tua. Look, Mike McDaniels then came out, talking about, look, as long as he doesn't throw 10 interceptions in the game, we're doing good. So, again, I just think they're getting to a point now where they can get off his money. I think, new GM, fired the GM, and I just think, it's a sad state. We're probably going to see Mike McDaniels out at the end of the year. We'll see what happens to Tua. My guess is whatever GM comes in, whatever coach comes in, Tua is not going to be in the plans. But moving on to the other side, man, Lamar and the Ravens, like I said, he might be a little rusty coming in. Looked like the first 2 or 3 drives he was. And then he was right back to the old Lamar. Ravens were locked in. Again, we got to see about this defense. I get it. You hold the Dolphins to 6 points, but it was a deceptive 6 points. The Dolphins did get some yards up, and look, the Ravens again. It's you're yes, held them to 6 points. They put some yards up, and it's a team in the Dolphins that were clinging on to life with barely a pulse. So we'll have to see how that defense holds up moving forward. If the defense has truly turned around, then I think we're looking at the old Ravens. And the question now becomes is, are they in too much of a hole to catch the Steelers? Because I don't know if they're going to be able to string together enough wins to get a wild card spot with how the AFC is looking right now. Because you got to think from the way it looks right now, my assumption is, and let me just double check I'm right, but you're probably going to get possibly 3 teams out of the AFC West. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting somebody here. Let's see. Look, you're either so in the standings right now. Obviously, you have New England, Pittsburgh, the Colts, and Denver. Those 4 are already in. Now you're fighting with Buffalo, who you are 3 behind in the loss column. You're dealing with Jacksonville, 2 behind in the loss column. The Chargers, 2 behind in the loss column. And the Chiefs, who are 1 behind in the loss column. So right now, Chiefs are your best bet. Like I said, I think they probably go on a run. But again, those are all teams right now ahead of you that you would need, 2 of them to fall back? And not to mention in your own division, you have Cincinnati, who the ageless wonder Joe Flacco, keeping them afloat. Yet they have 1 more loss and the same amount of wins. So a half game behind the Ravens. The Steelers, again, if that defense ends up being what we saw and the offense keeps it up, again, they're going to be hard to catch. And so the Ravens are in real jeopardy, I think, of even if they can string together a good streak of games here, they still miss the playoffs just because they're so behind. And so, look, I think great to see Lamar out there. The Ravens, again, they're going to be a team that nobody wants to play. If you're on the Ravens schedule and the defense is back and Lamar is playing and he's healthy, the regular season Ravens are the most video game team ever. And so, yeah, again, I do not doubt the fact that they can go on and string off a bunch of wins. It's just really they need some help from some of those other teams that are ahead of them in the standings right now. And lastly, before we get into the trade grades, man, we are going to talk about Kyler Murray and what I believe is probably the end of his tenure in Arizona. So I believe this was this morning, we got the news that Kyler was going to be officially placed on the IR. So that's another 4 games. Now, maybe his foot really is just hurt. My guess is his foot's probably about 90%, but Jacoby Brissett has been good enough. And to be truthful, I think that Gannon, the coach, and possibly the front office is pretty much over Kyler. And so, look, it opens up. They are able to trade him. There's not much guaranteed money left on that. I think they've already taken care of all the signing bonuses, things like that, and all the guaranteed money. So you're basically, if you trade for Kyler Murray, there's no downside as far as cutting him. Obviously, you'd have to pay his $40 million or whatever he's making a year, but all the guaranteed money is good. So if you decide to cut him, you don't owe him anything. And so could I see a team like possibly a Pittsburgh next year when Aaron Rodgers is retired, maybe going after him? Yes. Again, if you're the Cardinals, you probably don't get a ton of draft comp for him. But to me, I think it's just for a guy who over the last couple of weeks there was speculation like he might play to now all of a sudden be on the IR. You have reports coming out about, his work ethic and things like that. To me, this is really just sounding off the alarm that his time in Arizona is over. And again, could be an interesting piece to see as far as where he gets moved this offseason. I doubt he plays another game for Arizona just because, look, smaller quarterback. We've seen he's had some injury issues in the past. And if he, gets hurt again, what could maybe have been a 3rd round pick you get for him is now a 5th. And so my guess is they probably keep him healthy, similar to kind of what they did with Daniel Jones at the end of his tenure. But I think that this has kind of signaled the end, thrown in the white flag as far as the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. Next, man, we're going to finish up here as far as the, recap of this week with some of the bigger trades that went on. We're going to go ahead. We're going to give them some grades here. And we're going to start with, the Colts adding Sauce Gardner. And so, for this one, I gave them a B for it. I think, one, it was one of their 2 biggest needs as far as on that team, because while the offense has been great, the defense has been really, really good. They could have used a pass rusher, and their secondary is not good. And now part of that is injury, and the other part is just, it's one of their weaker units. So going out, getting a guy who a couple years ago was probably viewed as the best cornerback or one of the best cornerbacks in the league, obviously has had a down couple years. So I think adding him, again, if he can kind of recapture some of what he was in his first couple years, then great. You got your cornerback, and you got arguably the best, one of the best in the league. Arguably the best, not arguably one of the best in the league. But again, it's 2 first-round picks is pretty heavy comp. And for one, it's heavy comp, and it really shows that, again, like we talked about earlier, Daniel Jones, if you're the Colts, he's got to be the guy now. Because you don't have the comp to go get a quarterback. You don't have the draft compensation to go get a quarterback. 2, it's a big, kind of vote of confidence and trust in Sauce Gardner that he is going to recapture that. Because when you look at guys recently who have gone for the kind of draft compensation and picks that he went for, I mean, we can look a few months ago, Micah Parsons. And Micah Parsons is viewed as a generational talent at his position. And so I think Micah Parsons in relation to Sauce Gardner, Micah Parsons is a much better player. And taking nothing away from Sauce Gardner, like I said, he's arguably one of the best in the league. But he's not a generational talent like Micah. And so again, if you're looking at this from the Colts, to me it seems like a slight overpay. But if Daniel Jones ends up being who it appears they think he is, and Sauce Gardner is able to come in and really kind of change around that secondary and that defense and help, kind of bolster that defense up, they're going for it this year. If it turns into a Super Bowl, then it's all worth it, right? My fear is you get the Daniel Jones regression. Sauce is, good, not great. And you're a first-round playoff exit. And then you got real questions about moving forward, what it looks like. And so because of those possibilities and because of what I think is going to happen, I got to give this one a B. Next one, we're going to go Cowboys adding Quinnen Williams. And so another former Jet on the move. And this one we're going to spend some time on because this one is an F. Just straight up absolute F. And has nothing to do with Quinnen Williams, who, look, at one point, incredible player, all pro guy a couple years ago. And, I think when I was kind of researching it 2 or 3 years ago, he was the best in pressure rate. The year after that, he was like top 5 in pressure rate. And now he's towards below average in pressure rate. And so in theory, he's a guy who bolsters your run defense, who even with Kenny Clark and Micah Parsons gone, the run defense is still terrible. So helps that. He's also a guy who, again, in theory, at his best, is a great pass rusher, great interior pass rusher at that D tackle. But so this is not so much a knock on him. While a part of it is, is he the player that people think he can be and he used to be? But here's the real reason I'm giving this one an F, right? And it's more so around the Cowboys and one, what they've told us, their precedent they've set, and then two, kind of just their totality of trades. And I know they grabbed Logan Wilson as well. To me, that's you trade a guy who was benched by arguably the worst or second worst defense to your own team for a 7th round pick, not really a needle mover for me. But so here's what I'm going to say as far as why in totality this is just if I could give it lower than an F, I would. And the only thing saving it from lower than an F somehow is the fact that it is Quinnen Williams and he is talented. So here's what we're going to start with. However many months ago when the Cowboys traded Micah Parsons away because, in their words, they're not one player away on defense. They need multiple guys on that defense in multiple positions that can make a real difference. And so they traded Micah Parsons for Kenny Clark, who in theory was supposed to help the run defense that Micah Parsons couldn't. They got a 1st-round pick this year, and they got a 1st-round pick next year. Now, what they've lost is they lost another interior guy, kind of whatever. He was a throw-in, so scratch that out. So they sent out a 2nd-round pick and this year and a 1st round next year. So essentially, for Micah Parsons, you got Quinnen Williams. You swapped Kenny Clark for another interior guy. And you traded a 2nd-round pick for a 1st round. So we'll break it down even further. You traded Micah Parsons for an older, less effective defensive lineman and to move up from the 2nd round to the 1st round. So that alone, and mind you also, the 1st round pick they're giving up in 27, they will be giving up the better pick between theirs and Green Bay's. So if either of them have a terrible year, next year, that pick will then go to the Jets. So you're getting the worst of the 1st round picks in the following year. So to me, that alone is enough to warrant you an F on this trade. But now we're going to go to what Jerry said. When trading Micah Parsons, like I said, he said they needed multiple picks and they needed multiple players in that defense in multiple areas. And so the thought was, hey, we're trading Micah Parsons. We'll get an extra first round, which means an extra player blue chip player that we can put somewhere on that defense. Well, now you no longer have any extra picks. So based on what Jerry said, that is gone. Again, next one, recently, Jerry said, we're not one player away on our defense. We have the personnel, but we're not a player away from our defense. Basically, he said that they're not a player away from their defense being a legitimate defense. And then he went and traded for one player who he is now trying to sell is going to make this defense a legitimate defense. So again, based on what Jerry's told us, it's an F. Now, couple this with the fact of the Cowboys, you're going to have to pay in 2 years, I believe, or end of next year. Quinnen Williams is going to need a new contract. And so now you have to pay him because you're invested in him. So you're going to pay him probably around what Micah Parsons is making by that point in time. So again, you're paying the same, older player, less effective. And you didn't really get anything from it. Except maybe, you got a Kenny Clark who is now that you have Quinnen Williams, you have 3 defensive tackles who you are paying $20 million a year. My guess is Kenny Clark is cutter on the move. So, again, that's a wash now. Again, so to me, it's an F for many reasons. I think the Cowboys operated in this trade deadline like they were going to make a run. Even worse, the fact that Jerry told us before they lost this last game on Monday that this deal was already in place and ready to go. And then you lost, your playoff chances got worse, down to about 4%. And you're still going what seems to be all in. Again, it's bad on so many levels, but it's just so, yeah, an F is being generous with this one. Next, man, look, we're going to go with the Jets. So A+ offseason. Look, I know, the Jets, when you look at it, you're like, okay, well, you traded away your best 2 defenders who, at one point had them as one of the best defenses in the league. Lately, have not played great, and their defense has not been totally great. Now, look, if you're the Colts, if you're the Cowboys, you're hoping that, a change of scenery kind of revitalizes those careers. And look, we've all been in, okay, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us, I'm sure we've all been in, or most of us have been in a job where we do not like the job. And, when it's either whether it's bad culture, just you don't like the job, you don't like the people, you don't like the vibe of the office, whatever it is, right? You've experienced that. Do you want to get in there early? Do you want to really go out and give just A+ work every day? No, you don't. And so the hope, if you're the Colts or if you're the Cowboys, is that was it. Kind of ran stale in the Jets. Vibes weren't great. Not a great workplace for them. And now that you get them out and, you get them a new scenery, similarly to when you go to a new job where you love the culture, you love the people you work with, makes working and giving your best a lot easier. Hopefully, that's what the hope is if you're the Colts and you're the Cowboys. But from this point, you're the Jets. Look, obviously something wasn't going well in there. So look, you get off of those 2, you get a good haul of picks back, and now you can really kind of start revamping this team If you're Aaron Glenn, again, I'm a big proponent of if you're an offensive coach, you got to do more with less. If you're a defensive coach, you got to do more with less. So start using some of those picks on the offensive side of the ball. And Aaron Glenn, you got to coach up that defense. You're going to have to do more with less. But now you've really got the picks and the pieces to really go into the draft. If you have a good draft on the offensive side of the ball, you're all of a sudden relevant again. And it could be a quick starter to kind of revamping the Jets as a whole. You get to instill your culture with a fresh set of guys with, you're starting to get those players who, maybe have the stench of being with the Jets for so many years. You get those out, get some new guys in, really start instilling your culture. And again, like I said, you could see maybe a Lions kind of turnaround for the Jets. Again, that depends on if Aaron Glenn is the guy and depends on if you can go out and you can hit on these draft picks. But I think from a standpoint of the Jets, of what they could have done, maybe you could have gotten rid of Brees. I think it was said they wanted a third for him. Maybe so they don't get off that, but chances are he's probably gone in this offseason now. But yeah, I think it's A+ job from them this offseason. Next man, we're going to go with Rashid Shaheed going to the Seahawks. And I touched on this already. I love this move. Seahawks really a team where I wouldn't consider this going all in, but it's a move that's going to help you immensely right now. Again, like I said, JSN is having this amazing year. Now you're going to add another weapon, again, that gives you this real deep threat that defenses have to respect. And that's just going to open up the field more for JSN and for deep shots for Sam Darnold and for a team that, is looking like they have a chance to really compete. I love this move for them. And so for that, they get an A for this one. Now, and just mind you, I know a lot. I'm not gonna say a lot. I know some of you are gonna look at these grades and be like, "Oh my God, Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams are way better players." It's not about the player; it's about the fit and just what the team is doing with it. And the last one we're going to talk about here, man, is going to be the Eagles because look, Eagles and Howie were busy. They added Jair Alexander. They added Phillips, the edge rusher from the Dolphins. And look, when both of these happened, as I do with pretty much any Eagles news, I reached out to my people that I know who are Eagles fans and said, what do you think? And I think all of us were kind of in the same spot of, well, we don't really know. And that's so what I'm giving the Eagles grade on this is it's an incomplete right now. Because I think you got two guys who in Jair and Phillips who have shown they can play very, very high level football, right? But have not played it over the last few seasons. And so if you're the Eagles, again, you needed pass rushing and you needed help in the secondary, and you got both those things. And the hope is, and this is what I had texted is, the hope is playing next to Jalen Carter, who is going to draw a lot of attention from O-lines, opens things up for Phillips, and he can kind of get back to, being a high-level player. And the hope for Jair is, hey, Jair, you're not guarding the number one. Quinyon's got that. You're guarding the number 2 receiver. That's what we need you to do. And hope, and that, less responsibility, less talented receiver, being able to put Jair on that hopefully kind of makes up for, the player he's become now. On the flip side, if they're both what they've always been, then the Eagles still have 2 glaring holes in the defense as far as in pass rush and as in their second corner. And so this one is really like, we have to see how it plays out. So right now they're getting that incomplete from me. Next up, man, we're going to go ahead. We're going to look ahead to a few of the big games and just kind of some of the things to look out for here. We're going to go pretty quick because we are, we're hitting close to time right now. So this was going to go a little over, it looks like, but it's all right. So first game we're going to look at is the Bucks and the Patriots. And so look, this is a game to me where I know what the Bucks are. I view them as a contender. Um, they're a team that injuries have hit them pretty hard, but Baker, we know what we're getting from him. And they're a team, that again I think is a true contender. This one for me is I'm really looking at the Patriots because while yes, they have a really good record, first place in the AFC East, not really any good wins. Maybe one good win. One good win against the Bills. But again, so I think going in against Tampa with a chance to get a win over another contender really kind of just solidifies like, hey, this team is for real and Drake May is for real. And so that's what I'm going to be looking at, that with that game is Patriots and Drake May, can they go up against contenders, and can Drake May look like the MVP that he's looked like all year? And can the Patriots look like a contending team? Next one we're going to look at is the Rams and the Niners. So this one is big because one, for whatever reason, Shanahan and McVay, Shanahan's had McVay's number. A revenge spot for the Rams, losing in that game where, I think it was Mac's first start. And so, backup quarterback came in, kind of shocked the Rams. I don't think you're going to see the Rams get shocked here. Right now, I think the Rams are, a top team in the NFL. I think the Niners with the injuries, I think they're just kind of hanging on for dear life, and we'll probably see them start to fall off here soon. So I want to see the Rams come out and dominate. But also the thing I'm going to be really looking at is, can Mac Jones continue to prove me right about Brock Purdy? Because the more Mac Jones plays well, and if you look at their numbers right now between Mac and Purdy and just with the Niners, it's not far off. And so I've always come on here. I've gone to people I talk with the NFL about and talked about how you could put, not literally, but in theory, or, not even in theory, but like sarcastically, you could throw any of us as the quarterback for the Niners and Shanahan, and it'll be a functioning offense. Mac is showing that as long as you're semi-competent, you can get 95% of Brock Purdy, and that's who they just paid $50 million to. So that's another one. I just, as we keep going with this Mac playing for the Niners, again, the more he plays well, the more that contract looks bad. Next one, man, is Steelers and the Chargers. So this one's big because both teams really, really need to win. From the Steelers' point, we've talked about it. You got to keep your distance from the Ravens. And you're playing a team where, look, they lost Joe Alt, like I said before. They are a totally different team, and Herbert is a totally different quarterback with Alt in the lineup and out of the lineup. And so the Chargers are very gettable here. Again, I think that defense doesn't need to be in a complete return to form kind of thing, I don't think, here to have a real impact on this game. And so for me, I think the Steelers, this is a game that, again, you need it just to keep your distance. And you're kind of, it's a perfect scenario for you in the fact of your defense is playing all right, maybe not quite as good as it should be, but you're playing a team that without Alt in the lineup is really susceptible to making a good defense look really good or great. And from the Chargers standpoint, look, they got to keep up with the Broncos and try to keep the Chiefs at bay. And so, again, both really important as far as playoff implications and just standings in their division. So I think this one's huge. And for the Chargers and Herbert, you got to show that you can go out and play good football without Joe Alt. Lastly, man, we are going Eagles Packers and the battle of the inconsistent teams. And so with this one, man, it's again, I think whichever team shows up as, on their good day is the team that's going to win it. Um, you're kind of looking at both teams coming in from opposite sides of the spectrum where the Eagles just got done playing probably their best game of the year before the bye, and the Packers are coming in after playing a really bad game. And so, can the Eagles continue to, you know, build that consistency of playing well, especially on the offensive end? And if you're the Packers, can you put together a game where both your offense and your defense play incredible against another team that you'll likely have to go through in the playoffs if you want to get to the Super Bowl? And so, look, that's going to be our look ahead for this week. And then lastly, man, we are going to get into the our B's best bets, our top 5, and then we'll wrap it up here, man. So just as a recap, look, another 1-4 week. We're not looking great. Puts us on record 5-10. We're losing money. We gotta fix this. But just to recap, man, we had Seahawks -3 versus the Commanders, locked in, not a doubt. Cowboys -3 versus Arizona. That's just, I can't bet the Cowboys anymore. I thought the offense was gonna be able to just go out and out offense that Arizona defense, and I thought the defense could hold Jacoby Brissett to a little, at least put some resistance up. That didn't happen. Chiefs -2 versus Bills. Look, it is what it is. Jags -2.5 versus the Raiders. Worst win of the week for sure from any team. And then Bengals +2.5 versus Chicago. And this one was a bad beat because, let's be honest here, the right play for the Bears was not to score that touchdown, but was for the tight end who caught that ball over the middle to go down at the 1-yard line so they can bleed the clock, kick the field goal, and win the game, and then I cover. That's the right play. That's what should have been done. Should have been a win for us, but it wasn't. Guy rolls in and, ball game. So this week we are, look, man, we need a big week. We need a 4-1, 5-0 week. So here we go. Starting off, man, we are going Lions -9.5 at the Commanders. Big number to cover. Look, the Lions, here's what I'll say. They're coming off a loss, and they're a team who, if anybody's going to come out to send a message after a loss, it's going to be the Lions. And if there's anything we know about the Lions, it's that they don't take their foot off the gas. You're playing a team that just lost Jaden Daniels. Offense has been sputtering. Defense isn't great. So to me, this is a game where it's a big number at 9.5, but this is actually one of the ones I feel really good about. I feel really good about four of these. So we'll see. Rams -4 at the Niners. Again, I think Rams have something to prove here. Again, 4 is a tough number, but I think the Rams come out, dominate this game. And so we're going Rams -4. Next one, Ravens -4 at the Vikings. Look, that Vikings defense, I know they just got this win over the Lions. That Vikings defense isn't quite what it has been over the last couple of years. And look, the Ravens every week is desperation week. So every week they need to come out and they need to, have a playoff level intensity. And so that against JJ McCarthy and, a Vikings team who I think, beating the Lions was a real kind of celebration for them. I think we maybe see them come out not really ready for the type of game the Ravens are going to want to bring to them. Next one, man, Steelers at the Chargers. Like I said, I think this is a game where that Steelers defense can really show that I think it's a game that the Steelers defense can look better than it is. And again, like I said, without Joe Alt, the Chargers and Justin Herbert just haven't looked the same. And so I'm getting points on a team that I think could honestly come in and win outright. And lastly, man, we have the Eagles getting 2.5 points at Green Bay. Now, this is the one that's just tough because, again, it's two teams where I could see a blowout either way. I could see a weird game where it's a blowout one way in the first half, blowout another way in the second half. It's just the amount of outcomes is not great from what I can think. But you're giving me the Eagles, who to me I think are a top two, if not the most talented team in the league, with, yes, some glaring holes, but still incredible talent. You give me the more talented team. You give me the more that's pretty much it. You give me the more talented team of the two inconsistent teams. And next, man, look, big shakeup in the top 5. And so, look, for our top 5 this week, we are going number 1, the Rams. Number 2, we got the Eagles. Number 3, we have the Seahawks pushing into the top 5. Number 4, we have the Patriots now in the top 5. And number 5 was a tough one, man, because truth be told, I think it's the Chiefs. But it's hard for me to come in here and give that nod to the Chiefs when they've got the same amount of good wins over good teams this year as the Bills. And even though I think the Chiefs are a more complete team, and like I said, I mean, as I kind of laid it out earlier in that game recap, I think I would choose the Chiefs in a playoff game tomorrow. I got to give number 5 to the Bills. And so 1 Rams, 2 Eagles, 3 Seahawks, 4 Patriots, and 5 will be the Bills. And with that, man, look, that wraps us up for today, for this week. Like I said, be on the lookout, man. We are going to do the NBA podcast next week, so that will drop probably next Saturday. Look, as always, appreciate y'all, man. Look, as always, like, subscribe, click the bell on YouTube to get notified when we drop it. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Follow us on those. Interact with us, man. You'll definitely see me engaging in the comments on TikTok. So feel free, get in there, whether you agree, disagree with whatever's put up. But yeah, man, appreciate y'all as always, and we'll see y'all next time.